Hello there and welcome to Wednesday night's The State of Scottish Football in association with A State of Mind. I am Dr. Grant Campbell. It's great to be once again back hosting on this fantastic platform. We are live on Facebook, we are live on Twitter, we are live on Periscope, Twitch, you name it. Go and search us out, subscribe and like our content for all things Scottish football. Joining me to the left of me tonight is the one and only Sean McGill. Sean, how are you doing, my man?
I'm very good, thanks. I've been off gallivanting for a while, and I'm in need of a little bit of a detox, I think, Grant. And what better detox is there out there in the world than to talk about Scottish football? So, yeah, I'm delighted to be back.
Well, the doctor will see you now, so I think that's quite apt.
There we go.
I think that will be quite good. Remember, you can get your comments into the show and let us know what you think on all the major topics. Tonight, we'll be talking about the League Cup quarter-finals, Rangers against Livingston and Dundee against St Johnstone. But before we get into both of those matches, Sean, let's start with the Scotland women's team last night. They were playing their second match in the World Cup qualifying group. They recorded a 7-1 victory over the Faroe Islands. A fairly convincing win, but it was a bit of a nervy spell in the middle of the second half. But in the end, the Scotland team got the job done fairly convincingly.
Yeah, and it's great to see that sort of confidence oozing out of a Scotland side. It's not often you see a Scotland side score so many goals, so that was fantastic to see. And a pretty strong showing, considering that it's just been a few months really since Pedro Martinez Losa got the job. So it's great to see him implement his philosophy in this new era of the Scotland's women's national team. And I think it's a sign of good things to come, this positive start.
Yeah, absolutely. 6 different goal scorers last night. Erin Cuthbert was in amongst the goals, along with Martha Thomas, Jenna Clark, Claire Emsley and Christy Grimshaw. It's good to see our varied range of scorers over not just this game, but the game against Hungary past Friday.
Yeah, definitely. And some of them are absolute belters as well. I mean, Erin Cuthbert loves a banger at Hampden. I think she really enjoyed that one of the same as against the Jamaica game. And it was great to see them at Hampden as well, just to touch on that. I mean, long overdue that the women's team playing at the National Stadium. I know there was some disappointment about the attendance, which I think was justified. It was around 5,000. The manager was saying afterwards that hopefully next time they're at Hampden, you get some more people in to watch them. I think they deserve it as well. I've loved to have been there. I was on Boyne duty last night, so caught up with the game today. And like you said, so many different goal scorers was good. Jenna Clark on her debut, Chloe Arthur getting a couple, her first Scotland goals as
Both
well.
headers.
Was that sorry?
Both headers as well from Chloe Arthur.
Yeah, definitely. Well taken headers, really well done. And I think that the pick of the bunch for me, though, is Claire Elmsley's. I mean, I think it's just what a free kick. It's one of those that just makes you sit back and go. The technique on that is absolutely unbelievable. And I mean, she's a Midlothian girl, so I've got to rep the hometown. But yeah, just some really good goals, lots of attacking flair. Like you said, there was that sticky period, but to see them going out there, scoring goals, putting on a show, will hopefully just drive more and more people to Hampden to watch this team who, like I said, is the start of a new era and hopefully can push them on their way to the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Christy Grimshaw actually said after the game, it was good to score 7 goals, but I think there is so much more we can improve on. We all know we can step up. And is that the thing that you took away from these two games, Sean? Because went out to Hungary and won 2-0. You're seeing the Spanish in the group looking really, really convincing in the early stages. They put 7 past the same opposition last night. They're going to be tough to stop, as will Ukraine, who are, of course, are in this group.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, isn't it? And that's why it was so important to get off to this positive start, to go to Hungary and get that win, which they did against tough opposition, and then to show the confidence that they did last night, because we need to get these points on board. It was so important to get off to that 100% record in these first 2 games. I think you would have been really struggling. I know it's maybe a bit sort of reactionary to say that so early on, but I just think, like you said, the strength in that group of Spain and Ukraine, you would be worried if they did not pick up maximum points in these opening games. The fact that they've done that and done so with a decent amount of confidence, I think a clean sheet would have been ideal last night. It's a shame they didn't. You saw how much it meant to those Faroe Islands players, the way they celebrated that goal, despite being making it 4-1 at the time. They weren't celebrating getting back into the game. It was just that they scored the goal, so it shows how much that meant to them. And I think that there's tougher games to come, definitely, but to build that confidence so that Losa can really implement his style in these opening games, I think was massively important. So the fixture list is perhaps a little bit kind to us, and hopefully that benefits us in the long run as we look to head to the World Cup.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how important it is for the Scotland manager coming in to get off to a winning start and 2 wins. It has gone pretty much to form, and obviously very important for him too.
Yeah, definitely. And some sort of tough omissions for him as well. I mean, obviously, Kim Little's retired, and he's one of the most talented
Absolutely.
players we've seen in a Scotland journey for a long time, a jersey for a long time. So, and Caroline Weir missing through injury as well was obviously a big miss as well. So for him to come in and get a positive start in these first 2 games, I think was really, really important. And he was sort of talking about the fact that they didn't have a lot of time to practice things. He's himself getting used to international management. So I think that it's a learning process. We saw that with Steve Clarke as well. He said he'll need to learn how to be an international manager. He'll make mistakes, but he'll get there. And I think the same is true of Martinez Losa. So the fact that he's managed to get off to this winning start is very, very positive for the women's team. And long may it continue, because I think that since World Cup qualification for France, it's been a little bit disappointing sort of stop-start for the women's team. They haven't hit the heights. Even at the World Cup, you could say that being true. They haven't hit the heights we perhaps expected of them, and hopefully this is at the start of a corner being turned.
So that was Scotland's 4th consecutive win. They did record 1-0 victories over Northern Ireland and Wales before that double victory over Hungary and the Faroe Islands. And in the next game, they played the reciprocal game against Hungary. What did you make of the game on Friday night? Because it was a good win, but it was a game that could have been a bit more comfortable than the scoreline should have been.
Yeah, it's another one that I had to catch up with after the fact. But I think that it was a little bit turgid at times. Scotland were looking to break them down, and that's something that perhaps we'll have to get used to in this group, that against Hungary and Faroe in the next games, that we're going to have to be patient and break them down. I think that Scotland would have expected that in those games. But I think, especially in the first game, the group was just so important to get off to that winning start. And the fact they did it, I know the opening goal came from a penalty as well, but we got the job done in having travelled over there. So I think that as much as you'd want a little bit more attacking flair, a little bit more sort of incision in that forward play, that's a concern, and something that Martinez Losa, with his limited time on the training field, like I was talking about there, will be looking to work on. I think it will come with, because we have lots of talented players, especially in those forward areas. And of course, the display last night perhaps hinted at the fact that given the licence and the opportunity and that confidence going up, this Scotland team really can score goals.
Spain, by virtue of the rankings and expectancy, are really like winning the group. But Ukraine are the team to kind of keep an eye on, aren't they? And of course, they will also be looking to try and form a response after failing to make it to the Euros, the Women's Euros, after losing, of course, to Northern Ireland. So that could be very interesting as well in the coming months.
Yeah, and it's going to be a really tough slog, like what we're saying. And I don't really know what the expectations are, but the fact that we were there 4 years ago makes you think that qualification has to be the target here for Scotland. And what's the point of being there if it's not? I think that's fair to say. And there'll still be so much bitterness left from that World Cup. I mean, especially the way that final game ended against Argentina, having the 3-goal lead and just sort of completely thrown it away in those last few minutes was so devastating. Yeah. And I think there'll be a strong sort of feeling in the Scotland camp, even though there's new faces, there's lots of experience there, and they'll want to exercise those demons and really get back to the international stage, where I think this Scotland team, both men and women, they belong there. And I really hope that after these positive results in the first 2 games, that we can see the Scotland women's national team back on that World Cup stage.
Yeah, and I think the new manager's been very open to not just looking at the WSL in England, but also the Scottish women's game, and also further afield. I mean, you obviously look at the fact that he's gone over to look at Milan and some of the other clubs across in Europe, and I think that is very important to see that, and certainly something that he's looking to build his own philosophies within the women's team.
Yeah, I don't think you can be too sort of picky with just going with the WSL. I mean, it is obviously, I mean, it's growing and growing, and perhaps now the sort of elite of the women's game, maybe the American League would still rival it in that sense, but the money and everything that's been the new TV deal for the WSL is so exciting. So it would make sense to cast your eye there first of all, but it's great to see other players getting the opportunity, like you said. I mean, of course, Kirsty Grimshaw last night, who scored her first international goal, being from AC Milan as well. So it's good to see that you want to get a sort of taste of working with these players and who fits best into his setup. So that will take time as well. You can't expect him to just have his team pinned down straight away. So it's great to see sort of different options coming in, and hopefully they can sort of bed in fairly quickly, and we can keep this successful run going.
Well, last point on this before we move on. I mean, you mentioned Erin Cuthbert there at the start. She's obviously had a really good start to the season for Chelsea. How important is she going to be in the build-up to these big games coming up next month?
Yeah, you just hope she can keep her place in that Chelsea team, don't you? Because there's so much talent in that side. Of course, losing Champions League finalists and have dominated the domestic game in England last year under the ever-impressive Emma Hayes. So it'll be a tough time of it for Erin Cuthbert to keep her spot. I know in that opening game this season that Sam Kerr wasn't in there, Fran Kirby wasn't in there, as they build fitness. They're two of the best players in England. So and sort of play in that forward area as Erin Cuthbert does. So it'll be a tough task, but given our start to the season, it looks like she might be just sort of clinging onto that space and making a name for herself, which is so important. You can tell she has that drive to do that, and she could have perhaps looked for a move away, but she's wanting to test herself at the very, very highest level of the women's game, and that sort of determination, if that can carry on to the women's national team and really sort of spur them on to achieve the highest heights that they possibly can, then that's only a good thing for Scotland and Pedro Martinez-Losa as he gets off to a really good start.
Yep, Scotland play Hungary on the 22nd of October, and then they have 2 games in November, at home to Ukraine and away to Spain. Well, continuing on with Scotland in some respects, because last night it may have seen on social media that Aaron Hickey scored his first goal for Bologna in what was a quite entertaining 2-2 draw with Genoa. Sean, what have you made of Aaron Hickey and his move since he's went to Italy? He seems to be thriving in that team at Bologna.
Yeah, when the move was sort of mooted, I was quite excited about it because it was when he was linked to, it was Bayern Munich for a while, wasn't it? And you kind of just worried about him getting lost in that shuffle, because as talented as Aaron Hickey is and was in Scotland, I think we were all sort of comfortable in the assumption that he wasn't at that level yet to play for a European powerhouse at Bayern Munich. So I thought that Bologna was a much better move for him in a sort of career aspect, because it's a top 5 league, it's a solid club in Serie A, and he'd also get far more minutes was the hope, although it'd still be a struggle because, like I said, it's still an extremely high level. And he was kind of sharing the role last year with Mitchell Dykes. I know that he got sent off early last season when Hickey made the move, and it meant that he could sort of get himself into the side, and they were sort of swapping about. But it seems there's no doubt about it. He is Bologna's starting left back this season, has started all 5 league games so far, and of course bagged his first Serie A goal last night. So it's great to see. I think we always knew that he was an extremely talented player. There was perhaps a hope in Scotland that he would be shifted over to the right, considering that he's naturally right-footed, and that would give a sort of a better route into the national team, because we know that we're absolutely blessed with left backs, and at that time in particular we're really struggling for right backs. Of course, like Nathan Patterson and Calvin Ramsey have come into the fold over that sort of ensuing period, but it's great to see him thriving at, like I said, such a high level. And hopefully that goal just kicks him on further, because he's an extremely talented player who looks cracking with his tan. He's got a great tan since moving over there. You can see that he's enjoying his football. And I just hope that it continues for him, because to Scotland international to be playing abroad, it takes so much bravery and sort of courage to go over there and to immerse yourself into a completely new culture, a completely new league. And I think it's testament to Aaron Hickey's character and his talent that he's done so successfully to this point.
And a lot of other Scottish-based players are making their names now over across in Europe. And I think we've talked about this on a regular basis with other people on this podcast and on the panel. I think it's really interesting to see more and more Scottish-based players taking that plunge and having a go over in Belgium, like what Lauren Shanklin is doing at Beerschot. And, we've obviously seen it with a range of other players like Jack Harper in the past. But what I wanted to ask you about Hickey is obviously the fact he's playing with a real range of players in that Bologna team, including Marko Arnautovic. I mean, he's a very interesting talent who needs no introduction. But, playing alongside these sorts of guys who have played at European Championships and have been at the business end of World Cups, that will give him some confidence as well, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the opposition he comes up against as well will be massive. And I know it didn't go too well on Saturday when they were thumped by Inter Milan, but off the back of being champions again last season. But I think that just to test yourself at that level and among those ranks, I mean, I don't know, imagine Aaron Hickey, I mean, he's a couple of years younger than me, so he would have been watching Marko Arnautovic scoring Premier League goals, and now they're on the same score sheet last night as Marko Arnautovic scored a late penalty for Bologna. So you're absolutely right. It's going to only give him more and more confidence. And the fact that he's been sort of singled out as the starting left back, despite Mitchell Dykes being there for a while and having a decent pedigree himself, speaks to his talent. I wonder, Grant, if you can, I can throw a wee quiz question at you, because Aaron Hickey became the fourth player to score in Italy's, male Scottish player to score in Scotland in Italy's top flight. I'm looking this up here. Could you name the other three male Scottish players to score in Italy's top flight?
Well, Dennis Law would be one, I would think.
Absolutely.
I would think Liam Henderson would be another one.
I think Liam Henderson is just Serie B.
Ooh.
I don't think he'd scored a goal in Serie A.
That's a really good question. I was pleased I got Law. I would have been killing myself if I didn't get that one. I don't know, actually. I'm intrigued.
You might kick yourself at them. So Dennis Law, scored for Torino in 1961. Joe Jordan for AC Milan for 1982. And another Scottish player who's famed for his time over in Italy, Graham Souness for Sampdoria in 90. So big names there. Joe Jordan, Dennis Law, and Graham Souness. That's not bad company.
Good company, isn't it? It's good company, isn't it?
So, like we said, good company in his team just now, and good company in terms of Scottish male players who have scored in Serie A.
And one thing he's also in good company with as well is a manager who really gives him a lot of confidence. And Sinisa Mihailovic is a really good coach, isn't he? He's a bit unorthodox. He's a little bit out there. He gets very passionate. I think he was sent off at the full-time whistle against Genoa last night. I think Genoa scored, obviously a late penalty to get a draw, and I think he was sent off before the end of the game. But he's a very fiery character. But as you mentioned earlier on, he really trusts him in that left-back role, which is very good for us fans of Scotland, because it gives us maybe another option on the left-hand side, particularly if there is injuries to guys like Robertson, Tierney, and Greg Taylor, obviously, who's also been in the mix too.
Yeah, you're bang on, and Mihailovic is definitely a character. I think that he is one of the more fiery managers in the top 5 leagues of European football, and is. But he's got a good pedigree. I mean, his time at AC Milan, it was a really exciting appointment after a really good spell at Sampdoria. It didn't work out. I don't know if perhaps his character was a bit too much of when you're going to have a sort of, you'd say, a little bit more of an ego in some of those players at AC Milan. I know he butted heads with a few players during that spell, but it wasn't necessarily a disaster. And I mean, AC Milan have been really sort of on a roller coaster these last few years now, looking to be kind of back on the straight and narrow. He's been all over the shop, Mihailovic, but like I said, a great sort of career behind him in terms of the clubs that he's played for and the level he played at. And I'm sure that if he seems like the type of manager who, if Aaron Hickey has his trust and his respect and works hard for him, then he will really, really back him to the hilt. Any sort of misdemeanors, I don't imagine that Aaron Hickey would, and he could be quickly on his bad side. So it's good to see Aaron Hickey thriving. I guess the character that he's playing under Mihailovic can only be good for his character in some sense. It'll be a learning experience in some way or another, and hopefully it benefits him positively.
I know two of the top journalists in Italian football, James Horncastle and Gabriele Marcotti, really rate Hickey very highly. So I'm intrigued to see his progress over the rest of this season, and hopefully coming ahead, because he could be a very special player for many years to come. We're going to head into the meat now of tonight's show, because obviously the League Cup quarter-finals are very much in play tonight and tomorrow night. We have 2 games tonight. Rangers at home to Livingston and Dundee against St Johnstone. Sean, let's chat first about Rangers' match with Livingston. How massive is the League Cup for Rangers? Because obviously 12 months ago, they were knocked out at this stage in the competition by St Mirren. Steven Gerrard called it a very disappointing night that evening. Said it was a game that they really made a mess of. Is this a chance to right some wrongs from 12 months ago?
It's not even just from 12 months ago. It's Gerrard's spell as a whole, isn't it? The fact that he still hasn't won a cup competition, and in both last season, he was presented a great opportunity to, considering that Celtic had been knocked out in the state that Celtic were in generally last season. It's quite baffling, really, that Rangers didn't win either cups and didn't even make it to Hampden, didn't even get past the quarter-final stage. And, of course, that's where they are tonight. And in those games, it was not really like Rangers had loads of chances and spurned them. They really were blunt in both of those games. And they did score goals in the end quite late on. It was Stephen Davis against St Mirren, and then it was James Tavernier against St Johnstone. And you kind of thought, well, that's Rangers done it. They've scored their late goal. They're going to take it to extra time in one sense, or they're going to go on and win this game. And then both, they just managed to shut off from set pieces. It was Conor McCarthy who scored the goal for St Mirren, and of course, Chris Kane with that assist from Xander Clark. I hate it when people.
It is Xander Clark's goal. It's just for administrative purposes. It is
no, Grant. It's Chris Kane's goal, and I'm sick of people pretending it was Xander Clark's goal. It wasn't. It's a joke. Because who was Alisson scored like the week after, a couple of weeks after for Liverpool, and St Johnstone tweeted, "Oh, but Xander Clark does it better." He didn't score.
I'm only winding you up.
It winds me up. You're right, it does. No, but Rangers shutting off in those late moments really, really cost them, and that's kind of something you associated with early days Gerrard in those first couple of seasons. And it seemed as though they'd eradicated it last year, and they were, of course, like so imperious throughout the season, but in the cup competitions they came unstuck again. I don't know if it's the pressure or the fact that they need to get this monkey off the back that they haven't done it in the cup competitions. But I mean, Steven Gerrard's had 6 opportunities at winning a cup. He's gone out the quarter final 4 out of those 6 times. So I think that a win tonight would be absolutely huge. Gary McAllister's been saying as much in the press that it's absolutely massive, and there's perhaps a view both in Scotland and England that the League Cup is at the bottom of most teams' priorities, but that's certainly not the case for Rangers, and it can't be given their form in it so far. They have to get to Hampden, and I know Livingston had a great win at the weekend, but given Livingston's form overall this season, it would be disastrous really if Rangers lost this game tonight. So all the pressure's on them for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a look at Gerrard's cup losses here. There's a really good piece on the BBC Sport website wrote by Thomas Duncan. Gerrard's Rangers have lost the League Cup semi-final to Aberdeen in 2018, and also the Scottish Cup final against the same opposition that season. They also, of course, lost that extraordinary League Cup final in 2019-20 to Celtic, and then, of course, the Scottish Cup quarter-final to Hearts under Daniel Stendel's management. Let's not forget about that. And then, of course, you mentioned there about the St Mirren and St Johnstone games. When you strip everything back, you know, is there a little bit of bad luck in this? I mean, you look at the Celtic game in the final particularly. I mean, Rangers dominated pretty much most of that final, but come up against Fraser Forster. They also were maybe on by a potentially dodgy offside goal that Christopher Julien scored, which won Celtic the final. But there's obviously also other games where the individual mistakes and, as you say, switching off have cost them dearly.
That's only one of those occasions, and I'm struggling a bit to remember those ones back in 2018-19, if I'm honest, Aberdeen ties. But
well, the Ferguson header from a corner is one.
You're helping me there. You're helping me bring some of the memories back. Thank you for that, Grant. But I mean, that was, like you said, an extraordinary game. I think it's the right word for it, because it was just unbelievable that Rangers didn't win that game. And of course, like you said, the
quarter-final game in the Scottish Cup is the replay down at Ibrox after it was 1-1 at Batodry. I think it was 2-0 down the road. Graham Shinney, I know, scored one of the goals. So, yeah. I
wonder why you remember those games so fondly, Grant. That's quite interesting, that. But
small highlights of an Aberdeen fan from that season.
Yeah, definitely. You don't get many, haven't in recent years, so I guess you've got to cling on to those. Save a Kilmarnock fan. So that Celtic game, Fraser Forster, like you said, absolutely unbelievable that day. But in those most recent ones, I wouldn't say they were unlucky. I mean, that was definitely the peak of Stendhal ball at Tynecastle, those brief moments where Hearts just looked at their high pressing best, and the electricity that poured out of Tynecastle on those occasions. They're really up for those games, and when they were seeing good football after a period of unhappiness under Craig Levein. I mean, I went to Tynecastle a few times with some Heart Sporting pals over that period, and it was genuinely miserable. Every time there was a long ball, just the boos raining down. Tynecastle was not a good place to be for the home side, which is a change. So they were so excited to have that attacking football, and that sort of fed onto the pitch. And what were a couple of great performances against Rangers under the German. And like I said last season, St Johnstone played really, really well at Ibrox in that game. I know they won it on penalties and they scored that late goal that was a bit sort of it came in dramatic circumstances, but Saints were, I mean, the opening 20 minutes of that game, you wouldn't have known who was undefeated in the league. Look at the two sides, because they were absolutely fantastic. So for me, they've got to up their game. Like I said, it's not a case, apart from that Celtic game, of spurning chances. It's more that they've just been completely blunt. I mean, that's been the story of this season so far as well, really. I mean, it's not that Rangers aren't being sort of potent enough, it's that they're not doing enough to really get into those attacking areas, which I think is the real concern. And I mean, we're 12 games into the season in all competitions, and Rangers have scored 19 goals. At the same number last season, they'd scored 33. I think that's should be a massive concern for Steven Gerrard and his side. And if that doesn't change, and that's boosted by a 5-0 win over Dunfermline. So without that game, you're really looking at and posing question marks over Rangers' goal scoring. And of course, they'll be without Ryan Kent tonight, who's been off the boil anyway. I think that's another concern for the Rangers manager. So, I think that Rangers are really going to have to up their game in an attacking sense. And if they don't do that tonight, then it gives Livingston the opportunity to pull off what would be an incredible Old Firm double in just a couple of days.
Well, if Livingston are going to cause a shock, they're going to have to score at Ibrox for the first time in 8 matches. You know, they have not scored since 2019. In the last 8 meetings between the two sides, they haven't scored. You know, the last time they did was in a 3-1 loss in 2019. It was a penalty from Stephen Lawless. I mean, in terms of Rangers going into this game, how would you, so we don't know the team lineups yet. When we do, we'll bring it to you first here. I mean, what would you like to see Rangers set up tonight? I mean, do you like to see maybe a few players like Scott Wright playing again, Kemar Roof? There was quite a few changes at the weekend, but it didn't quite work against Motherwell.
I mean, I'd like to see Livingston go through, so hopefully they they don't put out the best.
Again, anybody not supporting Rangers, we want the same thing.
I mean, Scott Wright is one for me. I'm always going to back. If I can try and find an angle on the Old Firm sides, it'll be the Scottish players who I'm looking to back, and I'd like to see Scott Wright. I think he made a real case to get into that last Scotland squad, the way that he was playing in those opening games, and it's a shame that he's kind of drifted out. So I'd like to see him sort of come back into a little bit of form. I've been massively critical of John Lundstrom. I wouldn't like to see him in the side. I just don't think the Rangers carry the same attacking threat or sort of ambition or impetus when he's in the squad. I think he can be quite sluggish and slow them down. So for me, I would say that a sort of dynamic midfield three would be fantastic, but Rangers kind of have got this collection of very functional midfielders, almost like the connection is quite easy and lots of people have made it, that Liverpool side that were so successful over the last couple of years under Jurgen Klopp, that it's the forward players who do all the work while the three are a lot more functional. Even Gino Wijnaldum is a great attacking player, but was forced into this more sort of conservative role, and that's kind of what Rangers have become as well. I think Stephen Davis needs a break. I mean, the man's almost 37, and for me he was the best player in Scotland last season, so I understand why Steven Gerrard is so keen to play him, but he needs a break at some point. He can't be playing 3 games a week, which is what Rangers have to do a lot of the time, given their European exploits as well. So I think you need to find a way to drop him at the side, and maybe an opportunity to see Bakuna, who we haven't had a chance to.
I think we'll see him tonight.
And I think that would make a lot of sense for Rangers, and just see how they can shape things up and give this side a sort of bolt of energy, because they definitely need it. I mean, yes, they're going fine, and yes, they won the Old Firm a few weeks ago, but there's still this lack of real sort of urgency in this Rangers team. Of course, their win and run at Ibrox, which was at 21, came to an end at the weekend, courtesy of a 1-1 draw with Motherwell, and they'll be looking to bounce back tonight. And if they don't get out the traps, Ibrox will get nervy. They were not used to not seeing these positive performances. Of course, it was from home last year, but especially from Ibrox last year, they were so good, so strong. And if that doesn't get off to a good start tonight, I can see the atmosphere turning sour pretty quickly.
Do you think Fashion Sakala will start? I mean, he played in the game against Motherwell. He actually scored the goal, didn't he? And, is he going to be the man tonight? Or do you think Morelos will come in and really try and get himself back in the frame again? Because, again, lots of people asking question marks about his commitment and his motivation.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to play Sakala again, and that's maybe a bit odd considering he played the league game, but I think that he's not one of those first names in that front three, and the fact that he started and scored at the weekend might give him a little bit more of a foot up into that starting 11. So I think he's still a kind of question mark in terms of Rangers starting 11. I think to give him the opportunity in a cup game makes a fair bit of sense, especially if he's in some goal scoring form. He scored a goal, but I mean, like he's got himself up and running competitively now for Rangers, and he's kind of their marquee signing, really. I mean, I know John Lindstrom has the name power, but Sakala was kind of, especially with Itten leaving, they need more forward options, they need more sort of attacking threat. So I expect him to play tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can offer. I guess another question is, does Yanis Hadji come back into the side after having to miss out for COVID reasons? Because for me, when he's at his best, he brings a completely different dynamic to this Rangers team. He won't perhaps give you the same running that Steven Gerrard always loves, but I mean, the number of assists he racks up are quite staggering. He's just got that little bit more guile, and so he can unlock a defence, perhaps unlike anyone else in that Rangers team. And maybe moving Yanis Hadji into that three is something that can bear fruit for Rangers, that you still have these attacking options in the forward area, but a little bit more sort of that thread and needle pass that can really make a difference to this Rangers team. Perhaps that's something, but then again, you need that sort of functional, that strong aspect to a midfield like Rangers. So it's a tough one to see what happens there, but I think that Sakala staying in the starting lineup would make a lot of sense, and to see Hadji maybe do a different role tonight would be an interesting option for me.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on the team lineups when they do come out. You will hear of it here first. Of course, they have met already this season at Rangers and Livingston. Rangers won 3-0 against them on the opening day of the season. Hadji scored the opening goal, Scott Wright and Kemar Roof with the goals as well. The Livingston come onto this off the back of a stupendous win over Celtic on Sunday, Sean, winning at 1-0, courtesy of Andrew Shinney's goal. Is this a free hit for David Martindale's team tonight? It's a big opportunity for them to do what would be a sensational Glasgow double.
I think it is a free hit, and I never like saying that about the other Scottish teams going to either the Old Firm, because I feel like it's a little bit disrespectful. But given Livingston's start to the season before Sunday, I think you'd have to say that their priorities would be just making sure they get some points in the league, and of course they've done that now. But I think that Martindale's already kind of alluded to himself that he's got some injuries, and then he knows he has a big game against Hearts at the weekend. So I think that going to Ibrox and the fact that they've been there already, David Martindale will be sort of just hoping to see a performance, to see some players who perhaps haven't been in the squad too much so far really sort of make a stand and show him why they're ready for this fight that Livingston are inevitably going to have. But also, Livingston at their best for me in these type of scenarios. I know that they were I'd say dire really in that opening game at Ibrox, but Livingston struggle to break other teams down and don't really have that same sort of attacking threat. But in these scenarios where they get the opportunity to be really compact, they can thrive. They did it at the weekend, of course, and yes, it makes a difference being at the Tony Macaroni. But I think that you could see a pretty stern performance here from Livingston tonight, although, of course, Rangers are going to be favourites and I would expect them to get through.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that really impressed me off the back of the Celtic game was how good defensively they were. I mean, particularly the two centre-backs, Sobolai and Fitzwater, I thought they were outstanding. But when you go to Ibrox, you need a good defensive display, don't you, Sean? And Max Striek, the goalkeeper, I thought was really impressive. Again, he's going to be huge for them tonight, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And Striek's a keeper who I really rated last season, of course, displacing Rangers' Robbie McCrory, who has been featuring recently because of their COVID issues. But And Robin McCrew is a very highly rated goalkeeper, and I think you saw in those games for Rangers, perhaps he wasn't tested enough, but he was still a very competent goalkeeper and had a good spell at Almonvale before, so he was expected to be the starting number one. But Strike managed to displace him, partly due to McCrory's poor form, it has to be said, but he got in there and kept his place. And it's been a little bit of a shakier start this season. Of course, there was that late goal conceded against Aberdeen that gave them the win. And there was another fumble in the weeks after that I'm forgetting. What was that, sorry?
It was Motherwell, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, Motherwell, the winner for Grimshot, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, so thank you for helping me there. I appreciate that, Grant. So I was a little bit concerned because I thought that Strake was a very, very competent Premiership goalkeeper, and I was worried that had faded away somewhat. But of course, you said against Celtic, it seemed to be the old him was back. And of course, if Livingston are going to get anything tonight, if they're going to push Rangers beyond the 90 minutes, if they're going to pick up that win, they're going to need their goalkeeper to be at their absolute best. Because although, like I said, Rangers have struggled for opportunities, they still do get at least a few in a game. And if Strike's not ready for them, if he's not up to them, then it could be an easy night for Steven Gerrard's side.
I mean, one thing I always like to ask about teams that go to Rangers or Celtic is how important set pieces are going to be, because I particularly think that Livy will sit and try and frustrate Rangers in the early stages of the game, but they will get opportunities, you would like to hope, at certain stages in the match. And, you know, like what happened with St Johnstone last season, when you get a set piece, cause problems. And, you know, people like Jason Holt, I think, are going to be very key tonight, obviously, against his old team. I think Penrice has been really good. I really like the guy Williamson, who's come in and really made a name for himself. But I'm intrigued to see if they'll maybe go with a little bit more creativity at the top of the pitch. I wonder if Pittman might play tonight. I wonder if Alan Forrest might play tonight with his pace, maybe cause a wee bit of problems. But I'd love to know what you think. You know, could Bruce Anderson get a contention back into the team? I know Shinnie scored at the weekend, but Bruce Anderson, obviously a recognised goal scorer.
I think he could, because David Martindale's been saying in the press this week that Andrew Shinnie perhaps picked up a little bit of an injury in that game, and he knows, like I said, how big that meeting with Hearts is at the weekend. So there is a chance that he does rest Shinnie, despite that goal against Celtic, like you said. So I think that Bruce Anderson could come in, and I think Scott Pimpton, with his experience, of course, reached over 250 appearances for Livingston last season and was so key during their great run. I mean, I covered Livingston a fair bit during their run for Energy Sport, and I think that Pitt was fantastic. Another name you said there, Jason Holt, was quite often one of the best players in the park, and just the way that he keeps the game ticking over, while Marvin Bartley was kind of the destroyer and would break things up and then just pass the ball on, and they would let those forward players do the work. So I think that in a game like this, Livingston just had a big clear out, and David Martindale has spoken about that a lot, that despite their success over the last few seasons, he still felt that sometimes players are just at football clubs for too long, and that you need to have that fresh blood, you need to have that new era. So I think in a game like this, relying on those players who have been around for a while and know exactly what it takes to get a result like this away to Rangers would certainly benefit Livingston if they've got any chance to get back to Hampden, because I'm sure those fans would love it after getting there last year and missing out, of course, the final as well. It's such a shame. So that nobody was there to see it, despite losing it in the end. So yeah, I think that leaning on experience tonight would certainly be a shrewd tactic from Martindale.
Well, let's have a look, because Livingston's team has just been announced. They are going with a 4-3-3, which I think is quite unusual. I think it might go to a false nine, but it's Striek in goal, Devlin, Obalai, Fitzwater and Penrice as a back four, Holt, Omiyonga and Lewis as a midfield three, with Bailey, Montano and Shinnie at the front end of the pitch. Your thoughts on that team?
Stephen Omiyonga jumps off the page, doesn't he? Just because of his past exploits in Scottish football. I was disappointed with him in his second spell at Hibs, and I thought a little bit that he lived off that fantastic assistant with David Park. I don't know if you remember it, but that sort of reverse ball through for, I think it was Mark McNulty. That was one of the best passes I've seen in recent years in Scottish football, and I thought that his reputation was a little bit enhanced just because of that one great moment. But this is a chance for him to make his mark on Scottish football again. Yeah, the 4-3-3 is interesting. You expect that it'll be sort of end up being 4-5-1 in a sense.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. A false nine, perhaps. Yeah.
And Shinnie will have his work cut out up there by himself, but he did it to pretty good effect on Sunday. So interesting, definitely to see how Livingston approach this one in a shape perspective. And I can see that the Rangers team is out as well. I don't know if you want to go.
Yeah, I'll just say the Rangers team as well. So it's McLaughlin in goal, Patterson, Goldson, Balogun and Bassey, Lundstrom, Kamara, Aribo, Wright, Roof, Morelos. I mean, we talked there about Sakala, but it's Morelos who gets the nod tonight.
It is, and that'll maybe strike a little bit more fear into that Livingston defence, because despite the fact that Sakala seems to be a very talented player, of course we know we all know.
Instead of Barisic is also interested. It seems like he's maybe evolving into that first choice left back now with Barisic maybe just not hitting top gear at the moment.
He might just be, and I think that's one of those things coming into the season that you never would have expected. I think you would have. It would more be a question of whether Borna Barisic would have stayed at Ibrox, considering just how good he's been. After a pretty turgid first season in Scottish football, he really kicked on and became one of the best fullbacks easily in Scottish football. So I think that the question with Bassey, he's always been a great athlete, but his end product was really, really poor, I felt. I think that's where his game was lacking. And I was saying this to some pals before that Friday night Dunfermline game in this competition, and then he pulled off two assists, one of which was an absolutely belting cross for Hadji in that one. So yeah, I think that he's clearly been working on that, his end product, his delivery into the box, because he was never going to make it at a team like Rangers if he couldn't be incisive with his crossing. So it's good to see that he's worked on that, and the fact that he's keeping it Borna Barisic is testament to just how good of a start he has had. So I think that's a very interesting aspect, and one to keep an eye on, because it's perhaps a little bit worrying for Rangers just how comfortable Borna Barisic had been, and the fact that he felt kind of unchallenged. That's certainly not the case anymore. Steven Gerrard's making that loud and clear, and it makes sense to me that Calvin Bassey keeps his space. Yeah,
and passing in for Tavernier as well, which I think is very interesting as well. That dynamism on the right-hand side of that back four, also intriguing to see. Well, that's one of the two quarterfinals taking place tonight. Let's move on to discuss the other matches between Dundee and the defending champions, St Johnstone at Dens Park. I mean, going into this game, Sean, what do you think? Because St Johnstone got a much-needed victory at Pittodrie on Saturday. Dundee losing the derby against their bitter rivals United and really looking to get their season up and running.
Yeah. So for St Johnstone, I just thought it was so important to get the monkey off the back and just get that first win, because it's all anyone can talk about when you're talking about St Johnstone this season, that European run was over and we're now solely focused on what they're doing domestically, and the fact that they still hadn't picked up a win, and that's including in the League Cup against Arbroath. It took penalties to get past Dick Campbell's side at Gayfield. So I think that the fact that that's now happened, and a tough place to go as well in Pittodrie, although I'm sure you know that Aberdeen haven't been in the best of form recently. Let's not.
We're talking about St Johnstone.
Talking about St Johnstone, you're very right, and I think it was great for them to get the monkey off the back. And the thing with St Johnstone, and Cam Davidson spoke about it this week in the press, is that although last season was completely magical and unbelievable and unforgettable for Saints fans, it will still be a little bit of a sticking point that they never got to be there, to be at Hampden, to celebrate those Sean Rooney goals, to celebrate the fact that they made history. And just to get them there for that day out, even if they lost the semi-final, even if it was rubbish, St Johnstone deserved to get that day out at Hampden. And for me, that's why I'll have a little soft spot for Callum Davidson's side tonight. Although it's been a while since Dundee were at Hampden themselves, and St Johnstone continues to be the force in Scottish football. But I think that to get those Saints fans a day out in Glasgow, it is much, much needed. For Dundee, I was disappointed with them in the derby. It was not a great game of football, but in that second half, I felt like the introduction of Dylan Levitt, it just meant that United had so much more control in that game, and Dundee kind of surrendered it to them in a sense, although the game kind of got a little bit better from that point on, and it was an unfortunate goal to lose. I mean, the keeper should do better for Ian Hark's winner, but they're goalless in their last three, and that's a surprise given some of the names that you see in those forward areas for Dundee, particularly Jason Cummins. Of course, Lee Griffiths has been playing recently as well. And although I'm not sure where Killian Sheridan's sort of talents are at this point in his career, he certainly has been a proven goal scorer. I remember him being a pretty decent performer in a Kilmarnock side, it will be about a decade ago now. So I think that James McPake, has been saying that Dundee fans have been frustrated that they haven't been creating enough chances over recent years. That's now not the case. They're creating the chances. It's time to score them. And with those players, you'd expect them to be able to do that. And if it was another sort of blank score for the D tonight, I think that fans' concerns would just grow and grow, because once you get on that run and not scoring any goals, it's easy for it to snowball. And those forward players are too good to not be scoring goals. So hopefully it's an entertaining one, because neither of these sides have really got out of the traps this season.
No, absolutely. We have the Dundee team news for you here. This is their team. They go Legston's in goal, Kerr, Marshall, Fontaine, McGee, Byrne, McGowan, Ashcroft, McMullen, Anderson and Griffiths. And it's a big game for Lee Griffiths, because he had some good opportunities in the derby and spurned them, and he'll be keen to get his first goal for his new club.
Yeah, he will be. Some really good deliveries from John Marshall in that game, who impressed me. I think he was one of the players in a Dundee shirt who really stood out. So I think that connection will be something to keep an eye on tonight, whether they can keep doing that, those early crosses into the front post that Lee Griffiths was sniffing around for. Paul McMullen's always a great player to watch. He's one that can sort of set a game alight, and that'll be one to keep an eye on whether he can do it, because against his former side at Tannadice, he didn't really seem to do that as much. He didn't have that same licence, and against Hibs perhaps, that was on Sky as well early in the season, he did that to such great effect. But there's plenty of more than solid performers in that Dundee side that can make you think that they could get a result tonight at Dens, despite, like I said, St Johnstone being a cup machine at the moment. And Sean Burns, a player for me who can always sort of take control of a game. I think he's one of the more talented players in that Dundee side. And I think that you're looking at two of the teams who, for me, should be aiming, based on their squads, should be aiming for that sort of sixth position this
Absolutely
season.
Agree.
So I think it's going to be a very highly contested game, and some people might think that Rangers is a place to watch tonight, but for me, my eyes are going to be on Dens Park, because I don't want to watch Old Firm.
Yeah, I think this could be a really competitive game, and we actually just literally off the press have the St Johnstone team lineup. They go Xander Clark in goal, Sean Rooney, Effie Ambrose, Callum Booth, McCart, Liam Craig, Witherspoon, Crawford, Brown, Kane and Middleton. I think the thing for both of these sides, Sean, is the lack of goals. We talked about St Johnstone. They haven't scored a lot of goals this season, but they did get that win at Pittodrie. Stevie May getting the goal. I was surprised he maybe wasn't put in the team tonight, but Chris Kane getting the nod. Yeah,
and I think that Chris Kane's really evolved under Callum Davidson, hasn't he? Because Chris Kane he's not a great goal scorer, and he's still not a great goal scorer, but Callum Davidson's allowed him to just be an absolute pest up front and just really sort of harry.
He's like Lyndon Dykes in some respects, isn't he? He just does that work for other people in and around to mop up and try and create.
Yeah, different physically, of course, and I would still say that the Dykes is somewhat of a better finisher, but Kane does that. He just really and it's not like technically he's amazing as well, but he's just an absolute pest. And I think that he's really sort of come on to a game at St Johnstone in the last year or so. I mean, I kind of slipped my mind really till you said that Effie Ambrose had ended up at McDiarmid Park, just because he hasn't really featured so far. So that's an interesting one. Ali Crawford as well, who was so good at Hamlet Accies back in the day. How is he going to fare on his return to Scottish football? So lots of interest. It's not your most sort of conventional Saints side, is it? I mean, over the last year or so, you were comfortable in naming St Johnstone's best 11 for the most part. With some few interesting names in there, that will be it'll be good to keep an eye on how they perform, because St Johnstone, like I said, will be very, very keen to get to Hampden and have that day out for their fans, and to keep they are the League Cup champions, and they want to keep that status.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody who's into the betting and the odds, obviously gamble responsibly, but just having a look very quickly here at the odds for the Dundee St Johnstone game tonight, it's very tough to split. 13-8 for Dundee, 7-4 for St Johnstone, and 19-10 the draw. Incidentally, if you're looking for Livingston to complete a Glasgow double over Celtic, you're getting 14-1 for Livingston to win at Ibrox. I mean, we talked about this earlier on. It's two interesting games, but the opportunity, that prize of getting to Hampden for a League Cup semi-final is big for these four teams tonight.
Yeah, definitely, and it's big for lots of different reasons. I mean, Rangers you'd expect to be there, but like we've spoken about, they haven't been there in recent years, and they need to get themselves back to Hampden and to ease pressure off Steven Gerrard for a very poor record in cup competitions. For Livingston, of course, they were there last season. They want to give their fans that day out. And then, like I said, St Johnstone get those fans the day that they deserved. And Dundee, they'll feel a bit hard done by the fact that they didn't get to be sort of pile into Dens and Rugby Park for those promotion playoffs last year. And they came out of nowhere, really. Dundee were struggling massively last season. And the fact that they ended up getting promoted was quite sensational in that second half of the season. My view is that if they'd lost that game to Boyne Rose, James McPake would have been out the door.
I think that's a good shout, yes.
They were just seconds away from losing that game. It was just with 90 seconds to go that Afolabi scored that equaliser after rosekeeper Mark Weir put in such a good performance that night. So if they were not to the Scottish Cup, it could have been an entirely different story. But that late equaliser and eventual win gave them, I think, a kick up the backside, if I can say that, and really sort of spurred them on to eventual promotion against my Kilmarnock side. So, getting Dundee back to Hampden would be another sort of... James McPake has a funny record because he's never had the full confidence, I don't think, of the Dundee fans, but there's these sort of small flashpoints in his career that have kind of kept him ticking over, and of course the promotion comes into that. So if he can get them to Hampden, that'll be another tick for his CV and might just buy a little bit more confidence from the D faithful.
I mean, Dens Park is a really classic Scottish footballing ground, isn't it? And when the fans get behind their team, it could be a really raucous atmosphere. And St Johnstone will have to work hard because, of course, they met in the Scottish Cup, didn't they? When St Johnstone went on to win the trophy last season. And, of course, Guy Melamed scored the only goal of the game. But, of course, the game will also be remembered for a penalty that was saved by Xander Clark from Charlie Adam.
Yeah, and... Xander Clark has that sort of presence at penalties, doesn't he? I'm not entirely sure of his record, but just that sort of big imposing figure can really put players off. And you'd expect Charlie Adam to score in a situation like that, given his talent. So, I think that, I mean, obviously it's a Tayside derby as well. It's not Dundee's biggest derby, but I think that St Johnstone, there's still plenty of bite there, and because of the fact that the Dundee fans have been, Dundee clubs have been down in the lower leagues for the past few seasons. It's good to see all three of those teams back in the top flight, back contesting at the latter stages of these tournaments. Of course, Dundee United take on Hibs at Tannadice tomorrow evening. So I think that one will be a really entertaining game. Plenty of bite, plenty of battles, and I'm hoping for a good one. And here's hoping that both Dundee and St Johnstone can get off their sort of goal-scoring slump that they've been in and really make a difference tonight.
Yeah, well, it's predictions time. We're coming very close to the business end of the show. I mean, Dundee last win against St Johnstone at Dens was back in 2018. They won it by 2-1. A guy called Sofiane Moussa scored both of Dundee's goals that day. So there's a good fact for you. Can Dundee win tonight, and can they end this 3-year berth without a win against St Johnstone?
I'm going to go for aye. I'm going to say that, having seen that St Johnstone side, will Effie Ambrose be able to deal with Lee Griffiths and those crosses into the box we can expect from Jordan Marshall? Is Ali Crawford up to speed? I think that there's a few question marks in that Saints side, and I think that with the backing of the D support, like we were talking about there, and the Saints winning run got to come to an end at some point in the cup competitions. And of course, like I said, just squeezed past Arbroath. So I'm going to go for Dundee to sneak it in this one. I'm going to say 2-1 to James McPake's side.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to go for this match to be settled in extra time, but I am also going to go for Dundee to win tonight. I think they'll win it 1-0. I don't think it'll be one for the purists. I don't think it'll be an exciting game personally. It's just my opinion. But I do feel that one goal will be the difference, and I think Dundee will end St Johnstone's run. But St Johnstone have proved this wrong every single time on this show.
We've both went for Dundee, so it's definitely
them now, haven't we? We really have jinxed them. In terms of the other game, Rangers Livingston, what's your prediction for scoreline?
Yeah, I'm not going to be brave or try and be too clever in this one. I'm pretty confident of a Rangers win. It would be spectacular. Livingston could pull it off. I know from Dublin in just a couple of days, but for me, and especially given, although I spoke about the pressure that poor run gives Rangers, I think it also means that tonight is must win. They have to perform tonight, and they're on the whole they're pretty decent at doing that and occasions under Steven Gerrard. So I'm going to say that Rangers win this one, and they're fairly comfortably as well. I think I'll go for a repeat of the opening day and say 3-0 to the Gers.
Yeah, you kind of stole my prediction as well, because I think it'll be 2 or 3-0 as well. And I hope Livingston can make it competitive, but I just think
definitely.
Rangers look like they mean business. I think they need to try and get a result that looks like they mean business, so to speak. So I think they might just do it tonight. Obviously, this is only 2 of the 4 quarterfinals. The other 2 are playing tomorrow night. Celtic against Raith Rovers at Celtic Park. And as Sean touched on earlier on, Dundee United against Hibernian. Very quickly before the end of the show, Sean, how do you see both those games shaping up, particularly Dundee United Hibs? Because I think that could be a really intriguing game at Tannadice.
Yeah, definitely could, because there's no love lost between those sides either. And I think that Dundee United, of course, have been kind of stop-start this season, haven't they? And it's been in the big occasion where they've shown up against Rangers, and of course in the Dundee derby at the weekend. So they'll be hoping to carry that run, because this is a massive game. You can expect a really good crowd under the lights at Tannadice tomorrow night, I really hope. And Jack Ross, like we've spoken quite a bit today about exercising demons. It's after Rangers got knocked out the quarter-final, eyes were on Hibs to win both those cups, and they did so on neither occasion. So there's this reputation of Jack Ross sort of gained last season of perhaps not performing on the big occasion, not getting his team selection right, not getting the best out of those players at Hampden. He'll want the opportunity to prove people wrong, because Jack Ross has had a very strong career up to this point, but not winning a cup last season will be a sticking point for a lot of Hibs fans, despite their pretty impressive season finishing third. So I would expect both sides to be really, really up for this one, and I think we're in for a cracking game. Celtic Raith Rovers is an interesting one as well, because there's so much pressure on Ange Postecoglou already, and that's the nature of the beast when you're Celtic manager. And Raith will be looking to really just keep Celtic out for the first sort of 20 minutes or so and get that atmosphere sort of riled up at Celtic Park, get those fans nervy, get those fans on the players' back, and hope that they can just do something and get them, because they've been stop-start as well. It's kind of not a great start to the season for Raith, and that win against United was kind of a step in the right direction, and they got another one, and then it's like, oh, they seem to be going in the right direction now. So whether that can continue, John McGlynn will be just thinking that to stay in this game for as long as possible, and then see what he can do to Ange Postecoglou's Celtic, see if he can sort of ride on those nerves that they've been through. But for me, Celtic will get through that one, and I think I fancy Hibs as well to get themselves to Hampden. So I'll go for those teams in green tomorrow.
Yeah, that's interesting you've went for Hibs, because, you know, the potential of a Dundee derby for a semi-final and maybe a Glasgow derby for the other semi-final could be particularly interesting, but I'm sure all the teams will fancy having a say in matters. Yeah,
definitely. And that would be great. I mean, if you ended up with that scenario where you got an Old Firm and a Dundee derby and the same weekend at Hampden, would be fantastic. I mean, I hope the SFA don't book that on the same day like they did a few years ago with that Royal Rumble type scenario where 4 sets of fans were all going to be in Glasgow on the same day. They ended up moving one of the games to Murrayfield, of course, but I think it would still be a great occasion to see those ones. But why don't we save the Dundee derby for the final, and we just have let's do it that way. True. Before we go, Grant, I'm heading to Gayfield for the first time ever on Friday, as Kelly take on Arbroath. The winner will go top of the championship. Have you been before? I wonder if you have any tips on how best to wrap up warm, because I've heard it might be the coldest day.
Right, okay. Very quickly, here. No fewer than 3 layers. You certainly need more than 3 layers, I think. Of course, that game live on the BBC Scotland channel, so that should be quite a good watch.
It absolutely is. My dad was kind of like, oh, but it's on the telly, do we have to go? And I was just pestering her. I'm like, no, we need to go. So we bought our tickets today, and I'm very excited to see that one. Arbroath are the top scorers in the championship this season. Like I said, winner will go top of the league. So a big test for Kelly. It's probably the toughest away game in the Championship. So it could end up being a pretty miserable one, especially if it is cold on a Friday night. But here's hoping that Kelly can pull off a positive result.
Well, we'll preview that on Friday's show, I'm sure, and we'll also preview the other two quarterfinals of the League Cup on tomorrow's State of Scottish Football. We're just about bang out of time. Thanks to my comrade Sean for joining me on the ride tonight. Thanks to you all for tuning in. I hope you keep it here for a state of mind, the state of Scottish football. For me, Grant Campbell, it's good night to everybody and all the very best to you.